Hello, and thank you everybody who's joined us today for the second installment in our webinar series about higher education in America. My name is Jamie Bogyo. I'm a specialist U.S. admissions consultant with Bonas MacFarlane, and I also oversee Bonas MacFarlane's U.S. admissions department, which has helped hundreds of students from around the world apply to their dream university, some of which are represented here today. I've also had the pleasure of attending university in America at Yale before going on to study in London. So I've experienced higher education on both sides of the Atlantic, and I'm passionate about helping students make that leap when they're pursuing their own collegiate journey. Now, today, we're very lucky to be joined by three distinguished panelists, Sayaka Smith from Tufts, Brendan Graham from Northeastern, and Paul Reges from Tulane. Each of our panelists specializes especially in international admissions and reads hundreds of applications from UK and international schools every year. So they're truly an invaluable resource, and we're very grateful to have them here today. I could speak more about the particular strengths of each of these remarkable universities, whether it's Northeastern's incredibly diverse student body, with over 3,400 international students and a dining hall dubbed International Village that comes complete with its own sushi bar, or Tufts' famous a cappella group, the Beelzebubs, which have actually recorded songs for the hit TV show Glee, or Tulane's truly remarkable commitment to student engagement and public involvement. But I'll let the panelists do most of that. So I just wanted to give a brief overview about how the next hour is going to go. Each of our speakers will talk about their respective universities, and then I will ask a couple questions, and then we'll open it up to you guys to do a Q&A. So I please encourage you to write any questions you have into the Q&A box at the bottom, and I'll be sure to ask those questions on your behalf in the second half of the series. So without much further ado, I'll hand this over to Brendan from Northeastern and get it started.
Thanks, Jamie. Just going to share my screen here to get our presentation up and running. All right. So thank you for that introduction. I'm going to jump right in and start sharing some information about Northeastern University in Boston, Massachusetts. So if you're not familiar with us, Northeastern is a larger private research university that really places an emphasis on experiential learning. So what this means is we perceive there to be a real problem with the traditional approach to education where students are studying primarily in the classroom. And the way that we address this is by giving students the opportunity to take the things that they're doing in this traditional academic context out into the world and really apply them, put them to the test, see what works for them, and see what really inspires them when they have that more hands-on approach. So we do this through things that are probably familiar to a lot of students, like research opportunities, study abroad experiences, service learning courses. But the way that we are most well known for these programs is through a program called Co-op that I'll share a little bit more detail on in just a bit. But I want to start with the basics here. Again, we're a larger private research university with about 18,000 undergraduate students. And something you'll note for all three of our institutions, we are all Carnegie Tier 1 research universities. So we'll share a little bit more detail about research opportunities at our institutions over the course of this presentation as well. But again, kind of starting with the basics here, what do academics look like at Northeastern? So the thing I really want to emphasize is the flexibility that we offer students. It's a larger school that's, I think, often thought of as a STEM institution. And while it's true, we have great programs in our College of Science, College of Engineering, College of Computer Science, and School of Health Sciences. We also have a College of Social Sciences and Humanities. We have a College of Art, Media, and Design. So a really broad range of academic disciplines available to students. And then a number of different ways that students can structure their program as well. So students can do what is sort of the more standard major and minor approach at Northeastern. They can also do a double major program, but we also have something called a combined major, which is in essence a way to study two topics in really great depth, but also have it really be more curated by faculty to show students where those disciplines overlap and intersect. And the last thing I would want to emphasize is really the flexibility in terms of the program itself that students are studying in within their individual college. So as with many US institutions, it's really easy to move from one program to another if in fact you find that you're not in the program that's really the best fit for your interests. So we do have students change their major within the college that they're studying in, or even across colleges at Northeastern, and there are very low barriers to doing that. So I want to share a little bit of information now about the actual experiential learning programs I mentioned at the beginning. As I said, there are opportunities for students to do study abroad experiences, both short-term and traditional study abroad programs. There's a wealth of research opportunities at Northeastern, and students can get engaged with that as early as their first year of study, oftentimes developing a mentorship model with faculty members where they're working on projects in the campus-based labs or in other labs in the city of Boston. And then there's service learning opportunities as well. So being a larger urban institution, we do take up a lot of physical space in the city of Boston, and we want to make sure we have a really positive impact with the community. So our service learning courses are one of the ways that we do that. But the thing I'll talk about at greatest length in terms of our experiential learning programs is co-op. And if you're not familiar with co-op, this is really one of the hallmarks of Northeastern's educational platform. In essence, co-op is a chance for a student to work full-time in an entry-level position, doing something that's directly related to what they're studying in their undergraduate academic program. So when a student goes off on co-op through Northeastern, they don't take any classes at Northeastern, they don't pay tuition to Northeastern, they're purely focusing on their own professional development. And they're paid for that work the vast majority of the time as well. So this is not a new initiative for Northeastern. We've been doing this program for over 100 years now. We work with around 3,000 employers globally, a lot of household names and Fortune 500 companies. And it's not limited to Boston or New England or even the US. We have students doing co-op all over the world. So it's a global enterprise. And students often find themselves going where there is industry to support their work. So we have, for example, students doing finance in places like New York and London or Shanghai. We have students doing things with computer science in Silicon Valley or the Pacific Northwest. They tend to go where the industry is that supports them. Students can do up to 3 of these experiences as a Northeastern student. It's not a required program, but it is certainly part of the culture at Northeastern in that about 93% of students will do at least one of these co-ops while they're studying through Northeastern. Our requirement is just that students participate in some form of experiential learning while they're studying with us. And then just a few quick benefits. I think it's clear that this is great experience that all goes on a student's resume and speaks to their ability to really hit the ground running to prospective employers after they graduate. But the thing I want to emphasize is the way in which this program is really valuable to students in terms of helping them get a sense of what the realities of working in a particular type of office or particular type of industry are on a day-to-day basis, because those realities may not match their expectations. So it's a really powerful tool for them to get feedback and confirmation that the things that they're preparing for in the classroom really match the opportunities that exist out there in the real world. And it helps them bridge that gap between a theoretical approach to their knowledge and the application of it. So lots more to say about this program, but it's certainly a popular one at Northeastern. I want to talk a little bit about our campus community as well. So as Jamie mentioned, we do have a really diverse community of students coming from all over the US and all over the world. We have representation from over 120 countries. There are more than 50 languages spoken on campus. And we are one of the leading institutions in the US for international student study. And what do students do while they're studying at Northeastern? There are a huge range of extracurricular activities for them to get involved in and co-curricular activities. There's more than 500 student clubs and organizations. There are Division I athletics, as well as club and intramural sports. And all students live on campus for their first 2 years of study, with the option to live on campus for 4 years as well. It's something that's important to note as well about our campus community is that we have a traditional college campus at Northeastern. So it's in the city and it has that benefit of being in the heart of Boston, but it's not broken up by elements of the city. So you won't find private businesses or private residences there. It really does feel like a traditional college campus because it is. There are green spaces, student dormitories, academic buildings, athletic facilities, all of these different parts of the university that are really designed and support the student experience. And then quickly, just some information about Boston. If you're not as familiar, Boston is a wonderful college town. There are so many colleges and universities in the city, and it's really just a very lively, energetic place because of the energy all these students are bringing. Additionally, it's a great hub of not only education, but also healthcare, finance. There's a great tech and startup culture in Cambridge. So it's a really exciting place to be a college student and a place that you can really get to know quite well in the span of 4 years. So just some quick information as well. There are academic scholarships available to students. So if you apply to Northeastern, you're automatically considered for one of these merit awards. And then we do provide need-based aid as well to US citizens and permanent residents. And then finally, just some quick information about the outcomes we see from students. So I think these statistics really speak for themselves. The thing that I will emphasize to you, because the thing that really impresses me in working with a lot of students in our visitor center is the degree to which they know what they want next in their lives, either academically or professionally. After completing their Northeastern degree, they've had the chance to go out and try a few different things. They know what they like, they know what they don't like. And I think the way that we approach education allows them to really identify their passions and really confirm what their interests are. And that is, I think, related to the ability for them to get out into the world and really see the application of their knowledge. So there's a lot more to talk about all of these areas, of course, but I'm going to pass it on to my colleague Sayaka from Tufts to share a little bit more about Tufts University.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sayaka Smith. I'm an Assistant Director of Admissions at Tufts University. We are located just outside of the city of Boston, so we're in a more suburban setting. We cross the city towns of Medford and Somerville, and you can see our campus here, which is where we started. We have this wonderful traditional red brick campus that you come to associate with liberal arts colleges in the United States, because that is how we began. So next slide, please. So to give you a little bit of an overview, we are located just outside, 5 miles outside of the city, and this is where our main campus is located. It is where our School of Arts and Sciences, our School of Engineering are, as well as one of our graduate schools in the School of International Relations. It's the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy. But we're also part of a unique constellation of schools, which includes a medical school, a dental school, and a veterinary school, which are all housed off campus. So one question I commonly get are, do graduate students overwhelm, student opportunities? Absolutely not. You still have that traditional liberal arts college experience where you have really close relationships with your faculty and professors. One thing that I really hold dear is that your classes are primarily taught by faculty. You're not having teaching assistants teaching your classes. You are really getting to know them very well. I think about Sonia, one of the students who I know very well, talking about one of her faculty who this semester took a walk around campus with students in small groups with their young little baby, so that way they're getting a chance to really socialize and interact with each other. So our community is, I would say, it's a medium size, but we're on the smaller size of medium. We have 5,800 undergraduates, and the one choice they make is which undergraduate school they want to enter into. So you have the School of Arts and Sciences, the School of Engineering, and the School of the Museum of Fine Arts. When you make that choice, you are not tied to a specific major. You're able to share up to 3 academic areas of interest, but the whole point of the liberal arts is getting a chance for you to explore, to try out different things outside of your comfort zone and your intended major. In terms of our community is about 10% international students every year who require a visa to attend Tufts. But the international community, as I define it at Tufts, is a lot larger. There are many students who might be a permanent resident or maybe a dual citizen of the United States or have spent most of their lives overseas. And those students really do identify as part of the international community at Tufts, which is why we share that background statistic at the bottom. So let's start to delve in a little bit deeper on the next slide. In terms of our average class size, it's about 20, and our faculty to student ratio is 9:1. You may find classes get even smaller as you go along in your major, and particularly within our language classes, those classes are capped at about 15, so it's allowing for those chances to have great discussions with your peers. If you are a student who is thinking about double majoring, or you think I'm on a major and minor in something, that is definitely possible at Tufts. The walls between our schools are very low, and so we have engineers who might have a second major in the School of Arts and Sciences, or one of the minors which are specifically designed to make it a lot easier for them to minor in the School of Arts and Sciences. We have studio artists who are informed by their work and their non-studio classes in the School of Arts and Sciences. And obviously you have students taking classes between those, so you're definitely not siloed to your major. But let's delve in a little bit deeper into each of these undergraduate schools. So we're starting with the School of Arts and Sciences. We have over 150 different majors and minors. So there are some more traditional majors, you're thinking about art history or biology or physics, but we also have some more unconventional ones that are brand new, like civic studies. We're now going into the 3rd cycle, I believe, of this program. It's the newest program at Tufts. We also have some more interdisciplinary programs that we are well known for, like international relations, which is informed by our work that we have at the graduate school. So we have some of those amazing graduate faculty who also teach at the undergraduate level, like Professor Jeffrey Taliaferro. The majority of our undergraduate population are in the School of Arts and Sciences, and they're pursuing a curriculum which is not a core. It's foundation and distribution requirements. And those requirements are basically encouraging you to get outside of your comfort zone, to have a critical foundation in thinking and writing, but also some breadth in the arts, humanities, social sciences, natural sciences, and mathematical sciences. We also do require you to take 6 semesters of foreign language and culture classes at Tufts. So many students choose to take advantage of that by immersing themselves in another culture. Over 45% will study abroad. And we also have our own campus in the French Alps, where we offer courses in the summer with a homestay. One of the unique features that I want to touch upon at Tufts is the experimental college. So there were many experimental colleges that popped up in the United States in the 1960s and 70s, but Tufts has maintained this. So this is where we road tested courses and majors that are now in existence at Tufts, like Africana Studies and Film and Media Studies. And it's also where we have professors of the practice, like the manager of the Boston Red Sox came to teach a class on sabermetrics once. And we've also had students teach classes, like a really popular one this summer that we had was The Force is Female, which was a look at the Star Wars films through a women's gender and sexuality studies lens. So there are lots of things there that are timely, topical, and they're going to change all the time. So let's move on to our next school. So the School of Engineering is small but mighty. We have 900 engineers who are studying 16 different majors. If you're interested in engineering and you don't know what you want to do, that's perfectly normal because most of you haven't had exposure to chemical engineering during your high school experience. So you're project-based from day one. You have an Introduction to Engineering course, which allows you to get exposure in each of those different areas. It's a place where we're thinking about socially engaged engineering, and the last 3 entering classes have hovered around 50% women. So that's really important to us to have a very inclusive and socially aware engineering school. All right, let's move on to the School of the Museum of Fine Arts. So the SMFA is the newest part of Tufts. It became part of Tufts in 2016. We offer 3 different tracks: a Bachelor of Fine Arts, which is a 4-year program in interdisciplinary studio art, where you never pick a major. It's a completely bespoke program, so it's very different to other art programs. We also have a combined degree program, which allows you to be equally focused on studio art as you are on your liberal arts courses, or you can just take a single class. So we had some opportunities to really break down the walls between those schools with a class called Emotional Design, which was co-taught by one of our professors in the School of Engineering and another professor in the School of Arts and School of the Museum of Fine Arts. So it's really giving you the benefits of having a research school that informs your artistic practice with the opportunities of an art school that is affiliated with the 2nd largest collection of art in North America. In fact, some of our students have even exhibited in the Museum of Fine Arts before graduating. So let's delve a little bit more outside of academics and talk about research. If you're interested in research, it is definitely accessible at Tufts. It literally is just as easy as putting your hand up and asking a professor, hey, this thing you talked about in class that you're working on is really cool. Can I join your research team? And 9 times out of 10, if they have space, they'll let you join their team. It is going on in every single department. While I'm showing you a picture of like a professor in a STEM field here, it is going on in the English department. It is going on in women, gender and sexuality studies, or in earth and ocean sciences, where there are no graduate students, so all of the research opportunities go to you. When you are going on into your junior and senior year, there's definitely the chance to delve in and do more independent research, and we provide funding for you to be able to do that. So going outside of the classroom, let's talk a little bit about what happens after you leave Tufts. 98% of the class of 2019 were either employed or in graduate school within 6 months of graduation. 89% of Tufts students will do at least 1 internship. And just speaking for the engineering school, our dean says they're turning away internship and job opportunities by January of every year. That is how in demand they are. Our students learn how to make a difference by thinking critically, by getting involved in service opportunities at Tufts. They have lots of things to do that prepare them for those career opportunities. Okay, next slide, please, Brendan. So when I think about how you get to do that, how you have those conversations that are not just inside the classroom, I think about our residential communities. Tufts students are required to live on campus for their first 2 years. They'll live in a building like the one on the top left. And then after that, they have the option of either asking to live on campus. While it is not guaranteed, they tend to usually get that. Or they can live off campus in one of these triple deckers, as we affectionately call them in the Boston area, which are on the bottom right. The food at Tufts is really good. I'm going to definitely say that. We're one of the highest rated for some of the food that we have on campus. There are lots of different options, from a kosher deli as well as our 2 traditional dining halls. All right, on the next slide, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about student life at Tufts. We have over 300 different clubs and organizations. So whether you're interested in dance, whether you're interested in getting involved in student journalism, writing, poetry, civic engagement, or debate, whether you are an exceptionally skilled athlete or you're somebody who's into ultimate frisbee, we have 2 teams that regularly go to nationals at the club level. If you are interested in getting into the outdoors, our Tufts Mountain Club own their own lodge in New Hampshire, and you don't have to be a member to be able to go up there and get into the outdoors. But you're also supported by identity-based centres, which have 2 staff members attached to them, which is something that I didn't have in my college experience in the United Kingdom. We have an Afrikaner Centre, an Asian American Centre, the First Generation Centre, the Latinx Centre, the LGBT Centre, and a Women's Centre that are there to support you in addition to faith-based organisations and student affinity groups. It is a very supportive environment. So to wrap it up, what makes a Tufts student? I say that they are intellectually curious. They are somebody who will start on one subject and then have 6 subjects away from that when they start to hear about something that they heard on the radio or somewhere else. They are playful. We say serious about your studies, but not serious about yourself. They have a great sense of humour. They are collaborative. They are not somebody who hoards opportunities for themselves. And they are also someone who is a kind, active citizen. These are some of the qualities that we see in our students. Every student is an individual, but these are some of the qualities that we see and look for as we are going through the admissions process. But I'm going to hand over to Paul, who's going to introduce us to Tulane.
Perfect. Thank you, Sayaka. I'm going to go ahead and share the Tulane presentation to give you a bit more visual. But as mentioned, my name is Paul Burgess. I am the Director of International Admission at Tulane University, which is located in New Orleans. So we'll travel about 1,000 miles south of Boston and head to, I suppose you could call it the other colonial capital of the New World. So New Orleans being well known as the French colonial empire's capital in the Western Hemisphere until about the early 1800s when it was purchased by the Americans. Not long after that, Tulane University was founded in 1834, specifically as a medical college. The university has since grown in great lengths and leaps from that, now offering about 75 different majors across 5 different undergraduate colleges. I love to talk about Tulane, but I also like to give my personal bias that this is my alma mater. This is the university that I attended starting in 2007. So I'll start off by giving you just a little bit of basic characteristics of the university. So medium-sized, but sitting in between Tufts and Northeastern. Tulane has about 7,200 undergraduate students, each freshman class coming in at about 1,800 students. Definitely an academic environment that favors and puts forward direct interaction with faculty. So an 8-to-1 student to faculty ratio, an average class size of about 20 students. This really means that the majority of your academic experience will be discussion-based. So rather than having large lectures, most of the classrooms will be organized in a semicircle. And for students to find academic success, they will very much be expected to participate in the classroom, give their opinions, their takeaways from readings and research and lab sections and all these other pieces. Research spans many different disciplines at the university. I always like to put forward 2 different images. So one of research within the financial sector, utilizing the university's livestock trading floor, and then also maybe your more traditional neuroscience research. To talk about the academic structure of the university though, flexibility is an important takeaway. Students and applicants should remember that you are applying to Tulane University as a whole. Underneath the Tulane University umbrella sits 5 undergraduate colleges. So those are bolded and highlighted on this slide: the School of Architecture, Business, Liberal Arts, Science and Engineering, as well as Public Health. So the 75 majors that we offer are organized in this way. But if a student is admitted to Tulane, they are essentially admitted to all of the programs that you see here. So it's certainly feasible for a student to change their major and move from one program to another. But at the same time, I think what's most unique about Tulane is the breadth that we give and the ability for students to combine their differing areas of interest into one more cohesive area of study or research. So I myself, as a student, ended up majoring in architecture and economics. two areas that I was extremely passionate about. I didn't necessarily see at first how the two immediately fit together. It was with the help of my advisors and faculty that I came to specialize in the economic sustainability of remote indigenous communities, specifically within the Arctic region. So studying and understanding how industries like mineral extraction and mining, as well as a growth in tourism, was affecting not only the economy, but also cultural transition and language transfer from one generation to another. So certainly many different niche areas that our students can get involved in. You see a snapshot on the left side of the screen of the front end of the university's campus. The main avenue on which we sit, St. Charles Avenue, is where the tram system or the streetcar runs. So it's easy access for the 5 miles to get to downtown New Orleans. We are also a residential campus across the street from the city's largest park, but offering our own wide green quads, as well as housing, dining, and many other different student services. 91% of Tulane students are coming from out of state or out of the country. So for us, it's really important to be able to support students on a residential campus. Research flourishes in many different disciplines, certainly within programs like neuroscience and evolutionary biology. Almost 100% of students will be involved in research, but it spans many other different avenues. As I mentioned, within the business school, we have programs utilizing our stock trading floor, where students are managing about $1 million of the university's assets in a mutual fund that consistently outperforms the US average. 93 different other research centers and institutes on campus, focusing on things like international development, the largest Latin American studies department in the United States. Tulane does have, I think, quite an interesting history with Central and South America, the most recent president of Costa Rica being a Tulane alum, the owner and founder of the largest airline in Latin America being a Tulane alum, but many other, I would say, nuanced pieces of history, especially involving the construction of the Panama Canal. So we do have a strong engineering department as well. I'll certainly say that. To talk about the Tulane experience for students, though, is really important to characterize where our students are coming from. I said that 91% are coming from out of state, but the majority of Tulane students are also the only person from their high school to come to campus in a given year, meaning that almost everyone shows up, whether from Louisville, Luxembourg, or London. They're all coming to campus, and they're going to likely not know anybody else. The easiest way to meet people is to get involved. So about 75% of students do participate in athletics. We do have multiple stadia on our campus for our Division I teams, but also about 30 other different club and intramural sports. Everything from ultimate frisbee to equestrian. I was the captain of Tulane's equestrian team, tennis and football and soccer, and pretty much anything else that you can imagine. A really large proportion of student clubs and organizations for a university of our size. Greek life is an option. I would say not a dominant presence on campus, but certainly something some students do get involved in their second semester. Study abroad, also quite popular with our students. About half of our students will do a summer, semester, or year program abroad. Getting into some more of the unique aspects of a Tulane curriculum and education, though, something that certainly stands out is the university's emphasis on service, as Jamie kindly pointed out before. Tulane is consistently ranked the #1 institution by the Princeton Review for students involved in community service, and this really plays out through a student's academic area of interest. So our students studying architecture work on designs for affordable and sustainable housing. Our students interested in environmental science and engineering work on restoration projects for barrier islands off the coast of Louisiana that are eroding with tidal change and rising sea levels. Lots of different ways for you to get directly involved. Our students participate in the legal system through a court watch program, as well as working directly with the public defender's office in the city. We talk about giving of your physical strengths, which are maybe the images you see on the bottom part of the screen. So actually giving back to the community through this urban farm that you see here, but we also talk about giving back through your mental strengths. So utilizing that knowledge through the finance curriculum to help a not-for-profit invest their endowment to maximize returns, help recent immigrants to the city file their US taxes for the first time. All of these pieces are ways in which our students do give back. The city of New Orleans is probably the other most unique piece of the students' experience when joining Tulane. New Orleans, as I mentioned before, has a rich history and is also just a really culturally diverse and international city. I grew up in the Miami area, so I was used to a very international and diverse city. I was looking for something different in my college experience, but definitely parallels of that diversity and rich and vibrant culture. That is certainly something that you find around every quarter of New Orleans. The historic French Quarter, buildings dating from the 16 and 1700s, so for us Yankees, quite old. That's certainly something that our students explore, everything from well-known international restaurants to great holes in the wall to get some local specializations, and certainly live music, New Orleans being the birthplace of jazz, just another way in which I think the culture lives on the corner of every street. The other fun statistic that I like to throw out is that in New Orleans and Southeast Louisiana, we have more festivals than we do days in the academic year. So there's always something to celebrate. Certainly well-known events and festivals like Mardi Gras and Jazz Fest and the Voodoo Festival, but many others past that. I like to put up this image of Mardi Gras. So there are some well-known parades. So one named after the Greek god of wine, Bacchus. Well, there's an offshoot of that called Chew Bacchus, which you see here, an entirely Star Wars themed parade. Another parade named Rex, so named after, of course, the Latin word for king. Another offshoot of that called T-Rex or T-I-T, the French Creole word for small. Little Rex is, in fact, a parade entirely pulled by tiny dogs, usually dachshunds, pulling a float about the size of a student's desk, decorated in any way you can imagine. So just lots of different ways that I think the city really does live at a student's doorstep. And though their Monday to Friday experience is very much defined by academics, on the weekend, there's a lot available to them. I'll leave up this slide with some of the rankings that we find most relevant, as well as my contact information. I'm Paul Burgess, and I am listed at the top right there. So I think at that, we are going to transfer over to the next part of the program. But thanks for having me.
Thanks so much, guys. That was fantastic. It really made me wish I could reapply to university in America right now, because it's just the breadth of opportunities is kind of staggering. For anyone who has felt like that was a lot of information and it was hard to take all of that in, fret not. This whole thing is recorded and it will be posted on YouTube, and a link will be sent to everyone who attended. So you'll have a chance to really enjoy it a second time and maybe take in all that these amazing universities have to offer. One other question I wanted to flag up from the Q&A box as that was happening was, someone asked specifically if you could just quickly address the COVID measures for this year and for maybe the following years. I know obviously that's a big area of concern for a lot of international parents.
Absolutely. I think all three of our campuses do have students back and are in session in some varying degrees. I'll speak for Tulane. We did come back in session in mid-August. All students were required to check into a hotel that the university rented out in the city, isolate for 2 days, then be tested by the university's medical staff, and then they were allowed to move on to campus. Campus is its own sort of bubble in a way, but interactions are not entirely limited. Students can still go out into the city and practice social distancing, eat outside, all of those things. So for that reason, we are testing on-campus students twice per week for COVID, as well as faculty and staff. I think we're only really able to do that because we have our own fully functioning medical school and research program. So in many ways, it is life back to normal with a mask. Our positivity rate is sitting at about 0.3%, so far below the US average. We encourage our students to be as safe and responsible as possible. They have the option to take the entirety of their curriculum online, should they choose, but more than 90% of students did choose to come back to our campus. We have de-densified dorms by renting out some of the surrounding hotels. We've built additional temporary classrooms on campus to de-densify the education experience. So we're doing everything that we can, and it seems to be working. Our worst case scenario, should a really useful vaccine not come to light before the next semester and the next year, is to repeat what we're doing now, and it does seem to be working.
Great.
Yeah, I don't know that I have that much to add for for Northeastern, I think it's a really similar platform and program that we're doing in terms of the rate of testing students and then just general public health and security protocols and concerns.
I think it's also important to flag up that, because there's so many universities in America, it's not a sort of one size fits all policy. And universities do kind of have their own approach based on whether they're in the middle of a city or if they're more rural, whether they have multiple campuses or international campuses. So I think if there's anyone listening today who's really interested in specifically what a specific university is doing, the best thing to do is to get in touch with that university directly. I know we'll have the contact information for Paul, Sayaka, and Brandon up, but if it's another university you're thinking about, these answers won't necessarily apply to that university. So I think that's important to mention. I wanted to sort of switch gears briefly and start talking about kind of the admissions side of things, since I know that a lot of people today are applying to American University and obviously want to know what they can do to help their cause. So I thought I would start by talking about the Common App essay, since obviously that's a really different thing than the UCAS essay. Sayaka's nodding because she obviously did the UCAS essay and understands that it's a completely different beast. And I thought it might be interesting if you could each just briefly mention, instead of kind of theoretically talking about the qualities of a good Common App essay, but if there's one essay that really stood out to you over the course of the last year for whatever reason, and it was memorable, I think that would be pretty revealing to sort of to know why that sticks in someone's mind.
Okay, if I go first, I'll go. This is actually one that stuck out to me after several years, which is a really good sign, right? Sometimes people imagine that it has to be a really grand moment that has to be in the Common Application essay, that they must stand out by writing something that has never been written before. That is far from the truth. And also, between the three of us, we have read, gosh, am I thinking about tens, 20,000s of applications now, right? We've read so many. There is not a subject that has not been touched upon before. But the essay that I think about that I remember the most was A Slice of Everyday Life. A student talked about their love of languages and sitting on a New York City bus and listening to the languages that were around them and the dialects and little pieces that came in that really expressed her love for the Spanish language, which is what she wanted to study at Tufts. So even now I think about it because it was the tiny, rich little details that she talked about, the conversations with her friends, that makes it memorable to this day.
Yeah, I guess I'll hit both sides of the spectrum. One that's very similar to Sayaka's, which is actually from this year, a student putting a folding chair in their front yard and just playing music for their neighbors, and really tying into that their love of music, how they hope to pursue it at an academic level on campus, and how it really brought together some distanced and much needed social interaction for their particular little corner of the street. So that's one. I really emphasize for Tulane the supplemental statement. Definitely don't forget that. At Tulane, we value the supplement more than we do the Common App essay. It does not need to be as rigid or as formal. Remember, you're applying to an American university, not a British one. And Americans, I think, are stereotypically emotional and want to hear parts of what make you tick and what gets you excited and what helps you light up, all of those pieces. And my favorite ended up being very detailed, but it was from an international student who was interested in Tulane because of the French colonial experience, and actually compared and contrasted that to Pondicherry in India on a family trip that they had taken there. And it was just, of course, very well written and brought in, of course, comparisons and contrasts and things like that. But don't forget the supplemental statement.
And then I'll emphasize, I think, some of the same things. I think the actual content of the essay for the personal statement is perhaps not as critical as the way in which it's written. And I think the big takeaway is that we learn something about who you are as an individual. One that always sticks out in my mind, this student, this is an essay I read a couple of years ago. He wrote about his love of rice, and it was, he mentioned some comparisons to Jerry Rice and how he's a great athlete. So there was a nice tone of comedy underlying this essay, and not taking himself too seriously. He pointed out some of the tensions in his own Southeast Asian background and stereotypes and his level of comfort with these things. But he tied it all back to his interest in research in biology and agriculture, and in developing new ways to grow rice as well. So it was a really well-rounded thing. And I think he picked something as a focal point, which was not in and of itself critical to the success of the essay. The success was really more in me being able to understand his sense of humor, his interests, and his personality and what that would contribute to our campus community.
I emphasize know your audience, and the three of us are a little bit more senior in our offices and are probably on the upper end of the age spectrum of the average person reading your essay. I would say that the average essay reader in the US is somewhere between 24 and 30, 24 and 28, something like that. So your audience is actually quite young. Certainly the dean is making the final call on this. There is committee, but certainly to stand out, at least to the initial reader of your application, lighthearted and not taking yourself too seriously can help.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really interesting for me to hear, because I work with students so frequently who think that the way to do it is to write something about an amazing thing they did, an orphanage they built, or whatever, or even having it really academic. And it's really not about that at all. It can be about someone putting up a chair, or about their love of rice, or their listening to people. It's a really personal opportunity to describe you, the student, in the capacity that's outside of the classroom, in fact, because these universities are going to have access to your grades and everything like that. This ties into a question that we just got, which is, when describing the idea of an emotional essay, how do you tie that into your love for your subject? Which I would say, but you can get your opinion. I don't think you actually do need to tie it into a love of your subject, because you don't apply for a specific, you don't apply for a specific course. You apply to the university, unlike if you apply to read, philosophy or whatever at a university in the UK. You're just applying to the university as a whole in America. And so it doesn't have to be about, and this is why I love computer science. It could be, but it could also just be about something that tells the admissions officers who you are, and what your values and sense of humor is, if I'm right.
I think about that when I think about an emotional essay that it stuck to me to this day. It was one where a person talks about how they are the auntie or the mum of their group. Right? In every residential hall, you want to have that person who people go to when you have problems. You want to have the problem solvers. You want to have different types of people. And I think what Paul said about we wanting to know who you are is really important. And I'd really come back to the supplement, as Paul's saying, people this year, in a year where you can't visit, for us, getting to an idea of demonstrated interest, who is going to come. The supplement, well, with Tufts, we don't have a supplement. We have some questions which are very similar. That why blank essay is so important. We place a lot of emphasis on that at all of our institutions. I think that it's really key. Don't sell yourself short by not doing your research there, and don't be afraid to tie it back to why. It's one thing to say, there is this professor, Jeffrey Tagliaferri, and he's doing great work. Well, why are you interested in that? And what are you going to do at our institution?
Yeah, absolutely. I always tell students, you want to explain how you can fit into this university. So the first thing you want to know is what this university really excels at, and then that's great, but you also need to explain why those strengths play to your strengths or your interests, so that it's kind of like dating in a weird way. It's like finding a match, and if you guys aren't aligned, you at least try to make it seem like you guys are aligned. So I wanted to ask a question here. How does the difficulty of applying to top universities in the US compare with those in the UK? Are they really as exclusive as their acceptance stats would imply? If you have thoughts on that.
I think it really depends on a lot of things. So in addition to, just the broad admissions rate that you'd see on, maybe our websites or, other websites that you use to research institutions, there are other factors that are going on behind the scenes at universities in terms of their, in terms of their goals and initiatives in bringing in an incoming class of students. So, I can speak, for Northeastern, but I imagine it's probably not dissimilar at many universities that, we do have goals to increase, international student diversity within our campus communities. We're interested in students who are coming from diverse backgrounds, who are going to be bringing different perspectives into our conversations and into the campus community. So that can be a benefit to students. And if you were to, subset different populations applying, you might see some differences in the admissions rate. But I think the important thing to keep in mind is that regardless of a student's background, or international or domestic population, they do ultimately still need to be a good fit for the community and the university itself, and really be aligned with what that university prioritizes.
Yeah.
So hopefully some of those priorities are translated from sessions like this.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I would add that a major part of our evaluation, or kind of whittling the pool down from that really large number of applicants to the smaller number, most students who apply really are academically capable or close to it. A lot of that information is published online. Students oftentimes end up self-select in the universities they're applying to. So there are certainly some students who know the university is a reach and might not be academically qualified. So I would say that for an average applicant with an average transcript performance and maybe a standardized test score that is just kind of around the average for the university, it is that tough. It is kind of reflective of what our acceptance rates show. Now, I'm describing a student who, for Tulane, has not engaged with us in any way, has not attended a virtual tour or a session like this, maybe didn't write the supplemental statement or had a very generic or poor supplemental statement. Those are all the pieces that start to give you a little bit more of the edge. And really, as Brendan mentioned too, it does just depend on where you're applying from. All of us have titles and jobs that relate to the internationalization of our universities. So I think you'll find the acceptance rate for a comparable international student can sometimes be higher.
Yeah, I would agree with that from what I've seen over the years. I mean, I think one of the big barriers to international students traditionally has been the SAT. A lot of the times, maybe one of the reasons why Northeastern has been such a huge has had such huge appeal is that you haven't required the SAT. Although now, of course, that requirement is becoming test optional more and more. And I wanted to talk briefly about that because international students aren't kind of reared on the same kind of standardized testing that I had to go through growing up in America. I was taking multiple choice bubble, fill in the answer test from the age of about like 6 on. So it's a very different experience for a lot of international students. And I think taking the SAT can seem quite scary. So in light of how it's been kind of recently become test optional, I would love your opinion on how that impacts the rest of the application. If other pieces then become more important, or if you still encourage students to take the SAT if possible, even if the score might be slightly less impressive than their grades. What do you have any advice about that?
Specifically in the context of Northeastern, or just
Oh,
generally?
I guess I'm really more for Tufts and Tulane, since I guess Northeastern has always been pretty clear that they don't consider standardized testing the best indicator.
So at Tufts, we are test optional for this year and the next 2 years afterwards. It's a 3-year period. So whether you are applying this year or applying next year, it's up to you whether you want to submit an SAT score or an ACT score for consideration. If you say, no, I would not like you to consider an SAT or ACT score, we're not going to be wondering why. That's one thing I just want to clarify and put out there. And the other thing that our dean has also wanted to reassure students is that he's heard about students trying to jump through massive hoops trying to get access to testing. He doesn't want students to be putting themselves at risk or having to be clicking again, repeat on the ACT website to try and get a test date. So in that situation, if you don't have a test score, you can apply to Tufts without testing. Having a test score is not going to put you in an advantage. Sorry, I'm catching my words here. But that's going to be different. You might have different advice from different schools. We can't advise a student whether they should submit a test score. But Paul, I know you have some different advice on yours.
Yeah, so Tulane has also previously been test optional for international students. So I think we've had an existing rubric of how to evaluate those applications. I think of the admission process in terms of hurdles to cross. And the first hurdle to get over is the academic piece. We're looking to see not who is the absolute best and kind of the top ranking. We're judging to see who could find academic success at our institutions, who will be able to get by in the classroom and contribute and maybe need a little bit of support here or there, but for the most part can float on their own. And so if we're not looking at the testing piece, the two other academic evaluation pieces that we consider would be the student's transcript. That's certainly the largest and most important. So of course, the curriculum that they were in, the results that they received, either internal or exam marks, all of those pieces. And then letters of recommendation. So specifically academic letters of recommendation that come from the school counselor or that come from a teacher. Maybe if you did a summer academic program, you have an evaluation from some sort of professor. So that's the other academic piece for us. And academics still hold equal weight in the evaluation process if we're test optional. It just means that we're not able to lean on a standardized testing to help characterize things. You know, sometimes students will have some sort of difficulty in changing high schools or switching from one language of instruction to another, or maybe even just having a rough year with one particular teacher that puts a blemish on their transcript. Standardized testing in some ways is a way for a student to demonstrate, I still have this full academic ability, and then the letters of recommendation further characterize what the blemish on the transcript was and why it happened. So without the standardized testing, it's just one less piece to go off of, but we still have the characterization from your recommendations.
Absolutely. Just going to quickly, because I know we're running low on time here, I did receive quite a few number of questions for attendees before when they registered, so I want to address a couple of those now. One person said, in my English IGCSE, I achieved a 6 and 7, but have a Russian passport. Do I still need to do a TOEFL exam?
So if the student is currently attending a high school in the UK for Tulane, then no, we do not need any other form of English proficiency.
And is that true if it's an English speaking high school in a what if it's a English speaking high school in Switzerland or in Saudi Arabia? It's the same thing.
If they've been there all 4 years.
Cool. Yeah, makes sense. You only need to do a TOEFL to prove your English fluency if you haven't spent 4 years of high school in an English speaking environment.
And if a student is a native English speaker, so a Brit that just happened to move somewhere else and grow up most of their life in Nigeria, that's perfectly fine for us. We just ask you about your native languages, and if English is one of them, then we don't need testing.
Okay, great, thank you. Another person asked, is there any benefit to moving to the US after GCSE rather than after A-levels? Will the A-level narrow choices reduce my option for, I guess, applying to university? It sounds like that's a no. I'm seeing some head shaking. So I'll just go and say no. Great. You don't have to move to America yet, but do think about moving to America when it comes time to apply to university. And here's another one, which two questions are pretty much on the same thing. How much do you value extracurriculars like sport? And another question is, what do the universities look for to give sports scholarship? I know this varies from university to university, So
we value extracurricular activities a lot. Generally, they don't necessarily have to be athletics related. I think a lot of times what we're looking for in a student's extracurricular and involvement is evidence of depth in different areas. So I think sometimes there's a misconception that we're looking for students who are doing it all. You don't really need to be doing everything that's offered at your school. We want to see you do several things with a fairly substantial level of depth, though, and ideally also some leadership. So that's, I think, what is oftentimes prized a little bit more. So athletics is not the only way to stand out in that process. We're looking at students who are doing all sorts of, academic-based clubs or activities within their community that even extend beyond their high school. In terms of the scholarship piece for academics, for athletics, it's gonna vary from school to school. At Northeastern, being a Division I school, students can receive athletic scholarships. but they're determined by the coaches of the various Division I teams. I would emphasize that it's extremely competitive. Typically, students who are going to be playing at the Division I level at US schools are athletes who are some of the top performers either in their city or in some cases even nationally. So we're talking about really elite athletes. That process typically starts a little bit earlier on in a student's secondary school program as well. So this is not true in every case, but more often than not, students who are looking to be recruited for D1 athletics especially, they're starting to reach out to coaches as early as, you know, they're the equivalent of the 10th and 11th grade in the US, so 11th or 12th in the UK, to really get on their radar, share information about their achievements in athletics, highlight reels, and they start a conversation with those coaches. The scholarships themselves, though, and the value amount of them, they are determined by the coaching staff.
Cool. I'll move on just because I think if people have specific questions in the audience today and aren't able to get them all answered, there will be the follow-up contact information for each of these admissions officers. I'm sure they'd love for you to get in touch directly, and you can also, of course, my contact information will be on that too. So this isn't the end; it's the beginning, sort of thing. But I just wanted to ask quickly about. I am an American citizen and I have lived in the UK all my life. Is this likely to count in my favor or against me? I thought that was an interesting question. If you had any thoughts on that, whether that would check a box sort of as an international applicant, I think is what he means, which would work for him, or would his American citizenship and not needing to have a visa work in his favor? Yeah.
I think the application process for international students and US students, so the application form itself, the requirements are nearly identical. There might be one or two pieces that are related to a student's ability to receive a visa. And so essentially a US citizen going to school overseas has the benefit of the diverse experience that they've had during those 4 years and the understanding of a different educational system, but essentially none of the difficulty or paperwork of having to apply for a visa. So that's how I would characterize it.
Mm-hmm. Another person's asked, will there be a shock in how teaching works in the US as opposed to the UK? How is the workload? Well, I can answer a bit of this and say that it sort of depends. I think the workload at university, as someone who went to a university in America, depends on kind of what courses you take and what you make of it. But the biggest shock would probably just be the flexibility in the amount of courses offered. Obviously, it's a totally different higher educational system in America than it is in the UK. So I mean, there might be a difference in terms of seminars. Would you want to speak about that with the 10 to 12 thing?
I mean, I can talk a little bit actually just from my experience of speaking with British students who came into the US. One of our engineers, she talked about there were definitely some things that were taught differently in the A-level physics and math curriculum as opposed to how they're taught here. So there were some things that she knew that her colleagues did not, and there were some things that her peers knew that she didn't. So she had to work with some of her professors there. There was occasional things, but nothing that she couldn't manage. I think the other thing is that compared to the experience in the UK, you might have a class where you have one paper that makes up your whole grade, or one paper and one exam that makes up your whole grade, where there's a lot more continued assessment in the United States that I think that is a bigger factor of it that I would characterize as being different. But speaking to all of the international students, I would hope that Paul and Brendan would say the same. I think everyone adjusts to it, and also there are resources that are there to support you, whether they are your professors or international centers that are there to help you in the academic transition as well as the human kind of emotional transition as well to another country.
Brilliant. We're just almost at about time right now, so I thought I'd wrap up just by asking each of you to mention one thing that you think is either really special about your university, one thing that really matters to you about your university that you love. I love the moments when, you know, an admissions officer's passion for their university shines through. So just one quick thing that you really love, and we'll end it on that note.
I think what defines a Tulane experience more than anything, the two aspects. are how your curriculum is directly brought in to aiding the overall community and city. And that internship with a not-for-profit or a startup company that's built in for every student, I mean, that's extremely unique. And then, of course, just being in the city of New Orleans. Those are the big pieces that I loved as a student, and that's what brought me back to work there.
Amazing food, too.
Yeah.
Music's all right there, too, right?
Okay, right. Well, perfect. So that solves it for Brendan. He doesn't have anything to say about Northeastern, just nice things about Tulane.
I did repeat. I think I'm just going to repeat myself to some extent. I think the thing that really sticks with me about Northeastern, and the thing that I really like about working here and working with students graduating from Northeastern, it's really that confidence I see from them. They're so mature for their age. You know, these are individuals who are 21, 22 years old, and they're really confident in knowing exactly what they want to do in the next 5 years. And I think a lot of times students don't really figure that out for 3 to 5 years after they graduate. They have a few jobs. They kind of jump around to a few different types of positions because they just don't have that experience of, you know, doing a few different things. So that personal feedback that Northeastern's educational model affords students, I think, is the most valuable thing.
For Tufts, I would say, like, it's kind of exemplified by the experimental college, the fact that the kind of faculty are extremely receptive to hearing from students what they want to learn about, and they're excited to explore. So I think about the Tisch College for Civic Life. They created a new major called Civic Studies because there were so many students who were into civic engagement who wanted to ask those critical questions about, you know, who am I helping? What am I doing here? Is this really making a difference? They created that in response to student feedback about looking at the Peace and Justice Studies program and how that could be improved. So those are some of the things I think about Tufts, and that there's always people to support you, whatever you want to do. And that goes on after you graduate too with the alumni network.
Brilliant. Well, thank you all so much for being with us today. I thought it was a really informative, really wonderful webinar, and I hope that everyone in the audience felt the same and is excited about applying to universities in America. So like I said, it was a lot of information, but the whole thing has been recorded and will be posted online. And we'll send out a follow-up email with email addresses for each of the admissions officers as well as my own. So if there's any other questions that we didn't get to today, you know, we hope that this will be the beginning of the conversation, and that you'll feel inspired to continue your journey across the sea. And with that, I'll bid you adieu and say thank you so much. Bye.